For 3,000 years, concubines have existed in China, often forced and held captive. They lived harsh lives, without any free will, forced to attend to the emperor's every sordid need. Some lived comfortably, while others lived lives of brutal exploitation. Concubinage has existed in China for millennia and continued well into the 20th century. They were not mistresses, as they were legally and societally accepted sexual partners, though they were of lesser rank than a wife. Concubines were almost always of a lower social status. Wealthy men might possess concubines from relatively successful or prominent families, while poorer Chinese men might take slaves as their concubines. Sometimes, in cases of the family not agreeing to a marriage, a man without any wife may make his lover his concubine, as it does not require the full rites of marriage. In the imperial harem, the system took on a sophisticated form of potentially hundreds of women, all of different ranks, with the empress, the legal wife of the emperor, holding the highest rank. The imperial harem system began around 3,000 years ago and continued into the early 20th century until it was officially abolished after the fall of the Qing dynasty and the creation of the Republic of China. The number of different ranks amongst the harem changed with the ruling dynasty, but many had as many as 10 different ranks. The northern Qi dynasty, which existed briefly from 550 to 577 AD, had 10 ranks, including lower concubine of congealed brightness and lady of talent near the bottom, while the ladies of beautiful blooming were immediately beneath the empress herself. Life in the harem could vary greatly. Women could find themselves ascending the ranks of the Chinese court, reaching positions of considerable influence, while others could live harsh lives as personal property of the emperor, forced to attend to his every and any need. The Ming Dynasty, 1368 to 1644 AD, was infamous for its concubines and their treatment of them. Some emperors had as many as 9,000 concubines, many of whom were abducted from their homes, never to see their family again, destined for a life of exploitation. They lived a life of relative luxury, with the finest clothes and good food, but could never leave their palace prison and were subject to barbaric practices such as foot binding. Foot binding has existed for at least 1,000 years, and though illegal in the modern People's Republic of China, still occurs on a small scale, mostly in rural areas. Small, delicate feet were considered beautiful, and so all imperial concubines would undergo the painful and disabling procedure. The procedure began at a very young age. The foot was softened with warm animal blood. The nails were cut as far back as possible, and the toes were bent beneath the sole until they broke. The foot was then pointed down, and the arch was broken. The mutilated feet were then bound incredibly tight in bandages. The feet were then treated occasionally. They were cleaned, the sole beaten with a stick, and a harsh concoction was applied to remove dead flesh, and bandages reapplied. This occurred daily for around 2 years, and the girls were forced to walk long distances to further break their feet. Despite the constant cleaning, infections were common. Toes could die and go necrotic, dropping off, and many died of septic shock or gangrene, with an estimated 10% dying from infection. Even if the concubine managed to avoid these issues, she was still left disabled for the rest of her life. Those with lotus feet could hardly even walk, and they were likely to break their feet even more while doing so, or even tripping and falling, as they were unable to properly balance themselves. Zhu Di was the first emperor of the Ming Dynasty and was famous for his large harem. He established the Forbidden City, in which he housed his concubines. One new year following the creation of the Forbidden City, one of his most favored concubines killed herself after having relations with a palace eunuch. Zhu was enraged and wished to kill anyone responsible or knew of the rumors. This required an extermination of much of his harem. 2,800 concubines were condemned to death by Ling Qi, death by 1,000 cuts. The women were tied to wooden frames and were killed slowly with dozens, potentially hundreds, of separate knife wounds, given slowly over time. Chunks of flesh were removed from the arms and legs. Noses and ears were cut off, and fingers removed, ending with a stab to the heart or a slit throat. One of Zhu's concubines, Lady Cui, had been away at the time and wrote about the massacre. Lady Cui and the remaining 15 concubines, however, did not avoid harm. Zhu Di died 4 years later, and to take his concubines with him into the afterlife, the remaining women were killed on the day of his funeral and buried alongside him. They were executed in the courtyard of the Forbidden City, hung from nooses of silk scarves. 80 years after the death of Zhu came Emperor Zhengde. Zhengde was obsessed with discovering an elixir for eternal life, and he and his physicians believed the answer to be the menstrual blood of virgins. Over his 16-year reign, thousands of young peasant girls were taken from their families and imprisoned in the Forbidden City, so their blood could be collected and used to prolong the life of the emperor. To ensure their purity, they were fed a strict diet of only mulberries and morning dew, and many died of starvation. After years of this torturous existence, a group of concubines created a plot to kill their captor, Emperor Zhengde. 16 concubines waited until the emperor was alone. They held him down and tried to strangle him with a silk scarf, but having tied the wrong knot, they could not pull the noose tight enough. Zhengde fell unconscious, but they could not kill him. One concubine panicked, fearing their plot had failed, and, in hopes of saving herself, reported the incident to the empress. Despite her honesty to the empress, she was executed along with the others. Like the concubines of Zhu, the conspirators were sentenced to Ling Qi, and their families were also murdered. Politics and conspiracy. Imperial concubines had immense security when compared to the average Chinese woman. They would never go short of food, were not required to toil in the fields, nor might they fall victim to bandits or robbers, safe within the security of the Forbidden City. They were, however, no less than prisoners. Every aspect of their life was regimented, and they were without any free will. As the emperor's lovers, they were expected to excel in all the things that were expected of beautiful, noble women. They were forcefully educated in reading, writing, dance, music, and even embroidery, skills for which they would often be called upon to entertain the emperor. Divided into many ranks, the emperor usually had a select few favorites, while most would be called upon rarely. While they might not enjoy attending to the emperor, it offered them a chance to gain power and influence. The harem was a dog-eat-dog world, and just as in any powerful institution or establishment, alliances were created and plots were formed. Following the death of Emperor Gao Zu in 195 BC, his son Liu Ying took power as Emperor Hui, with Lu Empress Dowager. Most of Gao Zu's concubines were allowed to continue their lives as usual, according to the protocols of the palace, but the political meddling of one concubine following the emperor's death led her to be the target of Lu. Concubine Qi bore a son to the former emperor, named Liu Ruyi. Gao Zu had wished for Ruyi to be his heir. As he felt his second son, the son of his wife and empress, Liu Ying, was unfit to rule. Because of this, Lu resented Qi. Lu had her head shaved. She was removed from her position as a concubine, placed in prison uniform and forced to perform hard labor, a life totally unlike the one she had previously lived. After some time living as a forced laborer, Lu ordered Qi and her son, now Prince of Zhou, to be killed. Ruyi was poisoned, but Qi was forced to undergo a much more terrible fate. Lu was totally mutilated, Her eyes were gouged out, her ears and nose sliced off. Her tongue was cut out. She was forced to drink poison, and finally, her limbs were amputated. She was then thrown into a palace latrine, and as a final insult, she was declared human swine by Lu. After some days, Emperor Hui was brought to view her body. The incident shocked him so much that he withdrew from the imperial court, spending the rest of his life indulging in hedonistic pleasures, allowing his mother to take full control of the court and become the first female ruler of China. A long-lasting legacy. The system of concubinage began to die out with the overthrow of the last emperor of China, Emperor Puyi of the Qing dynasty. The newly reformed Republic of China wished to modernize, and the keeping of concubines was seen by some as a relic of a benighted age. Despite this, it still occurred. Chiang Kai-shek, who was instrumental in the overthrow of the Qing, had himself 2 wives and at least 1 concubine. During the Republican era, the sing-song girl industry also flourished. While not concubines, these women were not prostitutes either. They offered a sort of concubinage in all but name. They entertained in dance and song and provided sexual services, and were often purchased on contract, with some of these relations strictly business and all paid for, lasting years and costing thousands of dollars. After the Chinese Civil War, Chairman Mao took power. He believed the Chinese culture to be an impediment to the nation's progression into a successful, truly communist country. His cultural revolution aimed to destroy all remnants of old China, including religion, superstition, and gender roles. But he personally maintained the old harem system. He had 4 wives and countless concubines or mistresses. And much like the imperial concubines of old, it was seen as an honor to be his lover. The practice is now entirely illegal, but still occurs in an altered form. Businessmen who travel will have a kept woman, a concubine in all but name, or perhaps multiple, who reside in areas where he might spend time for work. There are an estimated 100,000 of these kept women in Guangdong province alone, most of whom were once poor rural villagers who moved to the city to improve their lot in life. The Chinese government works hard to end the practice, and those keeping concubines are prosecuted. But it is not easy to end a tradition that has been ingrained in a culture for 3,000 years.